over the last, gosh, it's hard to keep track anymore, I gotta say, of the number of times that the Sean Hannity's of the world and Tucker Carlson and all that crowd have complained that that Trump is being pilloried and vilified, and people just don't want to recognize what a great leader he was and how he did everything right. And the way that they convey that is to cut together, splice together moments where he actually gets whole sentences out, and never play things like when he's going, God bless, and meanwhile, anytime Biden takes a pause or has a stutter episode, that is clearly an example. Hold on, let me make sure this doesn't pop up in the middle of it. Let's see. Let me find that. Hold on. I'm looking for a clip real quick that I had up a moment ago, and then I brought it down. But over the course, and then they'll put together, a massive. Well, it's not even massive. It's like 8 moments on all these. I guess here you go. Let me see if this is this is one of the newer. So yesterday, Biden comes out and talks about how we need to pass the HR 1 and HR 4. I think the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which basically reinstitutes the voting right, the elements of the Voting Rights Act that the SCOTUS said, I don't think we need that anymore. And then Republicans all over the country proved, we did need that. It was the only thing holding them back. And but this is it's a rough day for Sean Hannity when he's got to explain to us how he love flag, we no love flag. So this is Hannity torches this one's called Hannity torches Biden's bizarre speech labeling GOP voting laws un-American.
Breaking today, extremely troubling rhetoric from the president of the
Yeah, it's very troubling. I'm troubled. You were troubled. It's just trouble.
United States.
Good trouble.
If you are one of millions of Americans who disagree with the radical policies put forth by the Democratic Party, watch out, because Joe Biden, well, he referred his political opponents today, referred to them as domestic enemies. Where's the media that got so upset?
You mean, well, okay, well, I'll wait till he finishes.
When Donald Trump said the media is an enemy of the people because they lie and tell fake news. Anyway, he's saying they're working to subvert American democracy.
Oh, I know what he's talking about. He said all threats, foreign and domestic. And so when he said threats, foreign and domestic, he thinks he means directly individual human beings as threats to our democracy, as opposed to actions they're taking or strategies by groups of people or people trying to undermine it from within. That threat that exists is the same as saying, we're back to the whole deplorables are all because Hillary Clinton called a portion of Trump supporters deplorables and said there was a basket of them. You could put, a lot of these people you can reach. These people are clearly in a basket of deplorables. That what she means is all Trump supporters are deplorable, and so they jump on that. And it's kind of like Donald Trump marries a woman, and in that marriage believes he can have sex with that woman anytime he wants because she's his wife, and therefore she's now in the basket of wife, which means all women are his wife, and he can have sex with them anytime he wants. See this. All right.
In a set of prepared remarks, this wasn't off the cuff.
By the way, Biden's foot is healing. You can tell by his gaits getting wider.
Suited for a despotic socialist dictator, Frank.
Despotic socialist dictator.
Joe Biden said that our country is facing its most significant test since the Civil War. Echoing Jen Psaki because...
No, Jen Psaki echoes him. She's the spokesperson. She says what they actually... They have a meeting. Oh, God. How long has he been doing this and he doesn't know how media works?
All state legislatures, why? They're requiring voter ID, like his state, standardized early voting, chain of custody, integrity and verification for all ballots. And now, according to whoever wrote Joe's speech...
Yeah, that's not the worrisome part. It isn't. As a matter of fact, modifications are being made to HR 1 and HR 4 to reflect some of those things. The problem they have is the idea that the state legislature can just, if they don't like the outcome of an election, pick a new group of electors and send those electors to Washington to fuck with our entire election. That's the stick out part. The rest of that stuff is just foliage.
Any Republican that supports integrity laws so we can have confidence in election results is what? An enemy of the state? And of course, Joe Biden, as always, invoking Jim Crow once again. Take a watch.
Take a watch. I have an Apple Watch. Will that do? I didn't take it. I purchased it. I don't know why Sean Hannity is encouraging people to steal.
21st century Jim Crow assault is real. It's unrelenting. There's an unfolding assault taking place in America today, an attempt to suppress and subvert the right to vote and fair and free elections, an assault on democracy, an assault on liberty. I swore an oath to you, to God, to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. And that's an oath that forms a sacred trust to defend America against all threats, both foreign and domestic. The assault on free and fair elections is just such a threat, literally. I've said it before. We're facing the most significant test of our democracy since the Civil War. That's not hyperbole. Since the Civil War.
Most
Right.
significant test since the Civil War. It's not hyperbole. It's a Civil War. Okay, according
No, it's not the Civil War. Why did we all, Sean, why did we all just watch the clip you played and we understood the words that were coming out of his mouth, and even though you were editing the clips and you put it together, hats off for actually using the actual sentences all the way through. But how did we just listen to that and you grabbed "It's the Civil War"? How's your tiny little pea brain work?
According to that bizarre speech, anyone that supports basic voter integrity laws is pretty much un-American unless...
No, because there's basic quote-unquote voter integrity aspects to the actual HR 1 and HR 4. It's the part where the elected officials in the state Senate specifically can overturn the will of the people at their whim. That is very concerning.
Unless, of course, you're a Democrat like Joe. To that end, Joe Biden is now empowering his Department of Justice. He's weaponizing them, frankly.
Yeah, frankly, is one of the worst people there. He just comes in a guns a-blazing. Hold on, I have to shrink this down. There you go. So you can see I want you to be able to see the Fiverr graphics. He paid $2.75 for him. You got to let
Attorney General Merrick Garland is currently suing the state of Georgia over their new voter laws, but he's not suing Joe Biden's home state of Delaware that he's represented about 5,000 years, which are far more restrictive. There's far less access. Take a look at your screen. Georgia, they allow 17 days, actually mandate 17 days of early in-person voting.
Mm-hmm.
Delaware has no in-person early voting. In Georgia,
Delaware has no in-person, or let's see, Delaware voting. Let's see. Let's see. Doesn't have standard residence cards here or there. Voter identification. They do use voter identification, and here's what you can use: Delaware driver's license or state ID, a U.S. passport, signed polling place or social security card, signed vehicle registration, signed credit card with photo, a similar document that identifies the person by photo or signature. So anything even close to any of those things will work. Let's see, poll times. Polls are open from 7 to 8 Eastern time. Let's see, primary election. Let's see, absentee voting. A Delaware voter is eligible to vote absentee in an election where he or she cannot make it to the polls on election day for one of the three following reasons: voters in public service in the United States, spouses, dependents, voters' work, schooling, or care responsibility prevents them from going to the polls. This applies to caretakers, students, otherwise eligible persons who are incarcerated. Otherwise eligible persons who are incarcerated. That's a lift Okay, so some incarcerated people can still vote. The voter is sick or temporarily, permanently, physically disabled. The voter is on vacation. You can actually, that's pretty broad for a reason for absentee. The voter's religious beliefs prevent him or her from coming to the polls. Let's see, early voting. Delaware does not permit early voting at all. As of April 2021, 38 states and the District of Columbia permitted early voting. Early voting permits citizens to cast ballots in person. States that do not permit early voting still permit some or all citizens to vote early by mail, often known as absentee voting. So basically, they don't have, So you have absentee vote, you have early voting. They just do it by mail, which is why he said in person. Very important distinction. So they allow anybody, for any reason you need, to vote by mail early. Doesn't cost you a stamp. You just don't have to come in. All right. So there we go. So that's the 0 days, whatever. There's no limit on it then. You can vote early as soon as you get your ballot in the mail. And excuse needed, apparently not. And then drop boxes are required by law, and they're not required by law. They're available, but they're not required by law.
Georgia, anyone can vote absentee. You're right. In Delaware, no. You've got to give an excuse and meet specific requirements.
Yeah, we looked at those. They're pretty lax.
In Georgia, drop boxes for absentee.
They include, by the way, the reason for absentee voting in Delaware, that's the excuse you need, includes being on vacation.
Ballots, they're available at county election offices all over the state. It's mandated. Delaware has 0 drop boxes for absentee ballots. Both states
No, they do have them. They're just not required by law.
require voter ID. Joe never lifted a finger to make voting more accessible in Delaware, and it's not just Delaware.
Let's see, what's the Delaware voter turnout? Hold on. Delaware voter turnout. Let's see. Election history 2019 said voter turnout. Let's see. Election results turnout. Oh, that's Delaware County. State of Delaware. Department of Elections. Registered voter totals by. Okay. That's the registered voter totals statistics. Hold on. Election results. State of Delaware. Department of Elections. For 2020, let's see, official presidential election results, official general election results. Let's see. There you go. This is the turnout. Districts reporting. Let's see. Let's see. Here's the primaries. Rocky De La Fuente got 11% in the Republican primary in Delaware. That's fascinating. Let's see. That's the primary. Where am I having? I want the actual turnout, you crazy person. Here's 2020, state of Delaware. Official presidential primary, general election results. Here we go. Biden got 58%. Trump got 39%. Howie Hawkins got 0.42%. Joe Jorgensen got 0.99%. 1%. There you go. Coons and representative. How about the? Let's see. 60. Let's see. They had 68% voter turnout of the registered ones, with 439. Let's see. Does this have? Where do we go for? Is there a see full report? So they had 68% voter turnout. Could have been higher. You could argue that if they had less issues, they could have more people show up. Let's see. By office, voter turnout. Click on there. Nope. Is there a thing in there? There it is. Okay. So by counties, I guess, ballots cast, there's 11,000 out of 17,000 registered voters. You got 63% in District 1. You got 51% here. Some of these areas had 71%, 71%, 71%. So the bigger counties had weighed down the number a little bit, or the bigger town areas or the districts in there dragged down the overall Sussex. I mean, there's a pretty good turnout by district in here. Just a couple of these with large numbers of people that had smaller turnout that made the number like closer to 68%. 509,000 ballots cast, 739,570 registered, 68%, 68.86 turnout in the general election. Nothing to sneeze at as far as turnout and volume of human beings. Could be higher.
Wisconsin requires voter ID. Rhode Island requires photo ID. Hawaii, you actually have to recite your date of birth and address. In Oregon, residents who don't vote
but you have to sing it
regularly, you can be automatically canceled from the voter rolls. In Connecticut, Minnesota, New York, voters must meet certain requirements in order to vote absentee.
Yeah, but all of these states that have even the voter ID ones, especially like if you're looking at Delaware, you're allowed to use a lot of different documents for voter ID instead of a state or federal issued ID. You have a lot of options in these states for photo ID. The problem with a lot of these is that it narrows what counts. NRA membership card counts, college ID does not. See what I mean? Yeah, that's kind of one of the standouts.
Unlike Georgia, none of these deep blue states are facing a lawsuit from this now emboldened, weaponized DOJ of Joe Biden. Not one. Clearly,
it has something to do with how the laws are carried out, not that the laws exist, and how much the citizenry trust their people in charge versus the other states.
The left's hysteria over Georgia and now Texas has nothing to do at all in any way about civil rights. It is beyond hyperbole. It's
Civil
destructive.
Civil rights.
Playing the race card.
You mean vote?
Oh, this is the worst challenge to our democracy since the Civil War? Really? Then why, Joe, have you never lifted a finger in the decades and decades, frankly, centuries, it seems, that you've served?
Oh, because he's old, right? I see.
Your state of Delaware. You never lifted a finger.
Because they didn't have a problem with it. There's not big signs of people being disenfranchised in the states. As a matter of fact, Delaware wasn't one of the states that in the previous version of the Voting Rights Act was singled out by legislation to make sure that they, cleared anything they did with the federal government. That might be why.
Merrick Garland, where's your integrity? Why aren't you suing Joe's state of Delaware?
Because they don't have a problem.
That has far more restrictive laws than in the great state of Georgia.
Well, they don't. Let's see. Well, first of all, I don't know that the, voter ID requirements, Georgia. So look that up. Let's see. What IDs are acceptable? Yeah, here's why. Remember what we showed, just like in Delaware, you can use even a credit card if it has a picture on it. You can use a signed Social Security card. Here's what you have to use when you're in Georgia. Okay, let me blow this up a little bit so you guys can see it. Any valid state or federal issued photo ID, including a free ID card issued by your county's registrar office or court, Georgia Department of Driver Services. Georgia driver's license, even if expired. Valid employee photo ID from any branch, department, agency entitled in the U.S. government, Georgia, or any county, municipality, board, authority. You can be a government employee and you can do it. Valid U.S. passport ID, that can't be expired. Valid U.S. military photo ID, that can't be expired. Valid tribal photo ID you can use. That's why. And by the way, none of these are free. Yeah, you don't just get these. I mean, I suppose maybe the government IDs, you get those because of part of your job, right? But a Georgia's driver's license costs money. So does a U.S. passport. So does a military photo ID. I guess you have to get a valid one to fill out afterwards if you've left the service. That'll be an interesting question. And then a valid tribal photo ID, which I don't know what that qualifies and which tribes they're talking about in particular or just in general across the country. But, that's fairly vague. But that's why. I mean, we just looked at the Delaware ones. It's way more open. You just got to prove you're you.
And by the way, everything to do with what? I can only think of the only reason you don't want voter ID, signature verification, chain of custody controls, partisan observers observing, and
Everybody has partisan observers observing. You just can't charge the place with partisan observers that didn't sign up.
and cleaning up the voter rolls has got to have
They do clean up the voter rolls. You just don't clean up the voter rolls when people don't have any reason to be cleaned from the rolls.
nefarious intentions. I would think this is a non-political issue. So ask yourself, why
Okay.
aren't Democrats worried about ballot harvesting and election fraud and integrity in our vote so every American could have...
Why am I not worried about it? Oh, I know I'm not worried about it because it's not a significant threat. I mean, I think there should be regulations around it, for example, to keep it clean. But I'm not concerned. I don't wake up in a cold sweat going, oh my God, can you imagine how many Latinos will get to vote?
confidence in our results. Now, tonight, Joe actually accidentally answered that question out loud because, according to Biden, it's not just about access to voting, but also who gets to count the votes. This is very interesting. Take a look.
That's what the bills are doing. That's, all right.
It's no longer just about who gets to vote or making it easier for eligible voters to vote. It's about who gets to count the vote. Who gets to count whether or not your vote counted at all.
That's why I want partisan observers on all sides to watch the count start to finish. If Democrats get their way, these far-left bureaucrats in D.C., well, I guess they'll be counting those votes, writing every election law, literally usurping the Constitution.
Yeah, he's lost. He's lost at this point.
Constitutional power
He's like, they're gonna, and what, and then the world
of state legislatures.
will fall apart.
That's what H.R. and S.R. 1 has always been about. It has nothing to do with voting rights.
It does not have anything to do with voting rights. Absolutely true. Voting is completely left out, and I think that's wrong. Wear a life preserver, kids.
Everything to do with centralized power, and frankly, the nefarious.
Credit, by the way, where credit is due. Moving graphic, still shitty, but centralization of power. That's still, it's a lot of syllables to say what you're saying. What? Asshole. Power grab. What? You see what I mean? No? All right.
Motives of Democrats that think the only way they can win is to have no checks and balances. The Democratic swamp, they want control of everything. The left's argument that minorities and rural voters, as Kamala Harris suggested yesterday, they just don't have access. They may not be smart enough to get a photo ID or register to vote, is complete and total BS.
Slam for claiming rural Americans can't photocopy their IDs. It's not a matter of whether they can't or not. It's that you're adding a cost. Any cost you add that somebody has to go through to provide their ID for something, if you have to turn in a photocopy of your ID with it, that adds an extra step both to your day or to what you have. If you have a scanner printer at home and you can afford it, run it right off. If you don't, that's another step in whether or not you'll vote. And anytime, if you add 1 cent to the cost of voting, it's a poll tax. And if you get away with it, you can start adding any poll tax you want because you've created a slippery slope to making you have to charge people to come in the building.
And quite frankly, it is insulting, beyond insulting.
No, it isn't. It's protective.
To millions of Americans. And
if you're insulted, you can afford it. If you're feeling insulted by this, then it ain't your problem. She's not who you're not who she's talking about. Do you understand how that works? She's not if you're like, I can too, then she's not talking about you, asshole.
And that's not stopping Kamala Harris from going on national TV, perpetuating this argument in the worst, most despicable way, frankly, possible.
Oh my God, the worst, most despicable way possible? She's not going to show a picture of Alan Dershowitz, is she?
Take a look.
Is agreeing to voter ID one of those compromises that you'd support?
I don't think that we should underestimate what that could mean. Because in some people's mind, that means, well, you're going to have to Xerox or photocopy your ID to send it in to prove you are who you are. Well, there are a whole lot of people, especially people who live in rural communities, who don't. There's no Kinko's, there's no Office Max near them.
You can make the
Right?
accommodations, really, Kamala? Now, of course, a large majority of Americans, including 59% of
By the way, what the fuck does this have to do with what she was just asked about? If you have to photocopy and send your ID in with your ballot when you send it in? Yeah, it does. You either have to have a scanner printer of your very own, and it works, and you have to have the ink to print it out because you're not just like sending in a PDF. Of course this isn't, and again, bitching about this, if you're going, that's offensive to me. Well, that's because you can't afford it. It ain't your problem. And as a matter of fact, more than likely, it shows that you don't give a shit about the people who can't, and therefore you are the one being offensive to millions of rural white Americans.
Of African Americans, they believe photo ID requirements do not discriminate against certain.
At the polls. At the polls. Hi, dum-dum. Sean. At the polls. She's talking about rural voters voting by mail and making them have to send in a copy of their photo ID in with the actual envelope. Adding a step to their life to vote that costs them money, which sets a legal precedent wherein you can charge people money to vote. Fuck that. And this poll you're about to cite, because you're a big fire hydrant-headed dum-dum, says these people think that it's fine, this number of people anyway, think it's fine to require photo identification at the polls. At the polls. Because if you've already gotten there, they're not going to go, yeah, I know you showed it to me, but I'm going to need you to go across the street to Kinko's and pay for a copy of it and bring it the fuck back and hand it in. We don't have photocopiers here. See, that would be illegal. Because it would be charging people to vote. How dumb? This dumb. Sean, you're a moron. Don't follow up a clip. And this is the second time in this one. The second time that he has played something and said something was said during the previous clip that was not said. Hell, this shows on all the time.
Certain voters. In addition to photo ID, what are the important things here? We talk about them all often, and every state should adopt these, our top 5. And that is, if you want integrity in our elections, confidence in the results, photo ID, signature verification, chain of custody integrity.
What does chain of custody integrity mean? Okay, in a bunch of these states, chain of custody integrity, that sounds good. Doesn't that sound good? I'm for chain of custody integrity, right? What they mean is, if you live alone, you have to have somebody in the house when you sign off, either a notary or some other person, God knows who the fuck that person is, a verifiable signature of a second party, to sign your ballot, that witness that you filled out your ballot. Never mind the fact, I suppose that other person could have filled yours out and then signed their name as well, and that's weird, but somehow that's reassuring to Sean Hannity. But the idea that if you live alone or you don't have somebody there that can, like if you're a single mom with children and your children are all minors and you're, in the middle of a pandemic, let's say, and you have to fill out your own ballot and no one can come over, or you're ill, or you have an autoimmune disorder, or any myriad of reasons why an American would be in a situation where they just don't have another adult in the house or nearby, or they can come over to as they fill out their ballot, to sit there and go, yep, that's you, and then notarize it for them, allegedly, as they mail it in. And then if they go and drop it off at a drop box, there's a bunch of states that are saying drop boxes don't count, not because people can throw in fake ballots, because that can be verified, you can tell that somebody's fake, but that somebody's going to burn up the box and somehow arson, right? That's the other one. Fucking hell. It's easy for them to do identity theft. Exactly, Sweet Indigo. Who's going to volunteer now when everybody has to mail in their fucking ID?
Voter roll updates for every election.
They do that all the time.
And partisan observers. That means Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Green Party, Libertarians. They all should be allowed to have observers from every political side to watch the counting.
Yeah, there are. They do. You do. But you don't get to have more of one side. Sean, dum-dum. That was the problem in a bunch of these places. They had election observers already signed up, already volunteered, already had done this multiple times and multiple elections. But then because Trump was like, it's going to be stolen, that a bunch of these assholes decided to storm counting centers and barge in saying we deserve to watch whether we don't believe this is fair. Meanwhile, there already is a Republican in there as the viewer.
Up close, start to finish. The state of Texas is now attempting to implement similar protections, but in order to, well, block that vote, Democratic state leaders, they're leaving Texas in order to prevent a quorum.
To prevent?
In the State House. See them, and they're in that plane right there. I don't.
That's a bus, dumb shit. It's a bus. It's a fucking bus. Look at the windows. Smiling House Dems fly off to D.C. on a private jet with a case of Miller Lite, breaking the... Okay, this is Dan Patrick's thing. That's the bus. That's their bus on the way. Just standing up, they're in a bus. You can see out the back. It's a fucking bus. You're dumb, they're dumb. Dan Patrick's dumb. You're dumb. I dumb.
I don't see any masks.
It's a bus.
Masks either. The very same Democrats.
They're all vaccinated. They're all flying together in a private jet and a private group. They're not out in public. They're not going to a public airport. And they're on a bus. Again, not an airplane. A bus. With nice wooden floors, by the way. It's classy.
Democrats are called the filibuster and affront to democracy.
That's a plane. See how that's a bus? That's a plane. That's a bus. That's a plane. That's a bus. Plane, bus, plane. Bus. Plane. See how that works? See how they look? Just so you know. Photo from Democrat on the plane. It's important.
They got on their private jet without a mask. They set off.
Yeah, because they're flying together with other vaccinated people. They're on a private jet. They flew private. They don't have to wear masks. By the way, is Sean Hannity saying that people on private jets should be forced to wear masks? What kind of anti-freedom pandemic bullshit is this? Right, who's working for the CCP now?
Set off for one big expensive vacation in Washington, D.C. to temporarily prevent a vote. Make no mistake, these images perfectly encapsulate the modern Democratic leftist New Green Deal Party.
How so? Oh, because they're using a private plane because they could be held up at a public airport and stopped by the governor from flying out. They had to fly out. They had to use a private plane to escape, lest they be arrested, so that they could get away. Sean Hannity's going to say they flew private, therefore they're using more carbon because they don't give a shit. Sean, did you follow through? And thank you, Lulu. Sean's idiocy is unbearable. I would never watch it without you. Thanks for making it fun. I try, Lulu, because don't forget, a lot of people take Sean Hannity seriously. I don't know why, but I mean, this dude is awfully hilarious. But this is, let me guess, he's going to go Green New Deal to hypocrisy because they're flying on a private plane. And then, what, does he name drop John Kerry? Do you think so?
The rules do not apply to them. The only thing that really matters is their status, centralized power right there in the swamp. Hey, Sean Hannity here.
What? Hold on. First they're in a bus, then they're on a plane, now they're at a podium. He didn't even, literally, he ran out of time to bring up the rules don't apply to them. They don't have to wear masks, even though you don't have to wear masks. Oh, in a private gathering, if everybody's been vaccinated, it's like, oh, fuck.
Is their status, centralized power right there in the swamp.
Well, they don't have status or centralized power. They're actually leaving Texas. They're going to D.C. because they're making their case while they're there. But they could go anywhere outside the state because the state police don't have jurisdiction to go bring them back. So, but you're right. You know what? You know what, Sean? You're right. Status is it's terrible. Thank you, Blitzkrieg, for resubscribing on Prime for 12 months. I appreciate that. Lulu, girl, thank you again. And Sweet Indigo, thank you for the super chat. And that's a great point, by the way, that you made earlier. It's easy for them to do identity theft and those things. I wanted to go past that. And Deborah Smith said, make a federal database where all citizens have to have their photo and fingerprints for voting. Then the Republicans will back off voter suppression. Yeah, most driver IDs now, they do one finger, either your index or your thumb. That's, and I'm down with that. Because there was a period at which you're like, oh shit, they're going to copy your thumbprint, and then there'll be a perfect thumbprint, every time whatever. My argument would be is, if you were really paranoid about that, just draw, make a little, scratch your fingerprint. Just make a big scratch through the center of it. Doesn't even have to be hard. Doesn't even have to break the skin, really. Just make a scratch and then do it, and then it'll heal. And then if they're like, we found your thumbprint at the scene of the crime, and they're like, oh, let's see what it looks like, and it's got a big scratch through the center, you'll know it was lifted from the record as opposed from your actual thumb, and you'll go, dun, 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 no scratch. That had happened only on the day in question, Your Honor, case dismissed. So, yeah, and by the way, Sean Hannity is wearing an American flag with a Israel symbol over top of it, I believe. Is that what's on the thing? But status. That's the important thing. Good Lord.